Are you ready?
I am, but I really don't think you are. And I think it's because you don't really want to talk about this band.
I'm sorry that my text that was clearly saying I don't want to listen to all four made you feel that way. I do apologize.
That's all right.
But I want you to know I did listen to all four.
Okay.
One of them on the train, so I did skip their 9-minute song. I skipped forward a little bit in it.
Okay.
Didn't change a thing. Still felt like I'm listening to this song. So I want you to know that I'm not lying. I gave it my all, and I enjoyed it some.
Good.
And I think that's how most things work. You give it your all, and what you get back is less. But you get some, got some. You get the sum of...
I got more back. I gave this band my all and got much more in return.
Really?
Yeah. And we'll talk about that.
Oh, man, that's a great segue. I'm sorry I'm talking because that was good. Hey, everyone ever, and welcome to 20th Century Pop, which is what we call the show now. And I don't remember if we called it that last week, but it's true. It's a slightly different title, right?
Yeah, it is, and I don't think we used it last time.
This is what they call rebranding or changing or just
rebranding
updating.
Works.
It's worth it, right? It's got an exclamation point in it. It's a little more direct when people type podcast usually gets auto-corrected, and there is a 20th Century Podcast, so now pop doesn't get corrected to anything.
No.
Maybe pap? Is that something you might call someone? Is that a word? No, I don't think so.
Not really.
It's good. No, it's great.
It is good.
Yeah.
And the show is called 20th Century Pop.
Right.
And what are you called?
Well, I'm called. Oh my God, you're right. I'm Tim Blevins.
And I'm Bob Canning.
And we're trying to understand that we're naming things differently except for ourselves. And there is also the catchphrase. Well, you know what's sad? A lot.
What is?
Well, I think last week's episode, the Buffy episode, actually had a few more listeners than normal. So maybe there's some carryover. Maybe more people are coming back. This is what we give them. We give them this. We give them a new title and a lack of an intro. And that's what the show's about. So follow us on Twitter, everybody, because you'll get more of this. More of this.
They will get more of this. They'll get more of everything after this, too.
Yes, and that's really what we'll focus on. Thank you. You're good. You're concise, is what you are.
I try. I'm excited. I'm very excited for this conversation.
For this episode, for tonight's, whenever you listen to its episode, well, it's probably better than what we just did to jump right into that.
Sure.
You're excited because, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
A little while back, I don't know if it was, I guess it was last year, actually, it's almost a year ago when I say a little while back, we did an episode of a segment called Oeuvre Compensating, if I'm pronouncing the word oeuvre right. And it's a segment we do once in a while where we take an artist from the past, a filmmaker, a musician, an actor, and we look at their body of work in the period of time that we're allowed to discuss, the 20th century. And last year, and I like to think of this as one of your wedding gifts to me. Thank you. I got an episode where I was able to talk about the most influential and impactful musician of my life, Paul Westerberg. And we did an episode where you and I discussed his 4 solo albums from the 90s. Yeah. It was a good discussion. I enjoyed it. It was fun to kind of explore that. And what I liked a lot about it was your insight in that episode towards how I listen to this music, but also just hearing how this music and our friendship and interaction with it, how the music can sometimes represent the other person. That's egotistical. I'm a prick for saying that, but
no, it makes sense.
Does it? Okay. Without being too head inflating. You know, there are bands that when you think of a person, you think of how they like this music, but also it makes you think of them. And tonight we're doing a version where if I can say, yes, more than Huey Lewis and the News, more than Harry Connick Jr., more than Huey Lewis solo albums. To think of you, my friend Bob, and listeners who I almost called readers, you should know this by now. To think of you in the world, I think of music. And when I think of music, I think mainly 90s music, but I think you know a lot of 21st century music. But what I think of the most, and what is tonight's topic, is what I believe is your favorite band of all time. Is that a correct assessment?
They used to be a Soul Place winner of favorite band of all time, Oasis. But right now in my life, it's probably a tie. Travis is up there.
I'm surprised to hear not your sole favorite band anymore, because this is a band. And here's the thing. I kind of know. I don't exactly know when you first found Oasis. I know a little bit of the story with the albums, but for you to talk about the band of Oasis, when you first heard Oasis and was interested, what were you finding in them that drew you to them?
I was finding a sound of music that I kind of knew I liked, but didn't have a lot of access to.
What was that sound?
That sound to me was kind of this 60s garage rock kind of sound with some jangle and some melody thrown in.
Were you listening to something like that at the time, or was it something when you found this, then you saw it?
I was thinking about this because it's like I really got into Oasis my junior year of college, which was 95, 96.
So were 2 albums out yet, or was it just the one?
2 albums were out when I really discovered them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking the year before that, I was listening to a lot of Hootie and the Blowfish and a lot of Weezer and a lot of Pearl Jam, but mostly Hootie and the Blowfish.
I was going to say those are all very different sounds, but okay.
They were all very different sounds, but yeah. But
all
they
very
weren't...
American sounds. That's
they were all
the
very
American grunge movement of the time,
yeah.
I guess.
And so when I heard Oasis...
I just put Hootie and the Blowfish in with grunge? Is that
and we're going to leave them there.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, when I heard Oasis, it was new. It wasn't new. It was an old kind of sound from a new band, and that was exciting to me.
So it was a sound you were familiar with, and you kind of knew garage. Like, what is garage? Like, not necessarily British then, more like, because there were a lot of garage bands here, I assume in the States in the 60s. I know the big hits. I don't know individual songs. I know like the Animals, the Kingfish, some other names I wish I could think of.
Or like, aren't the Trogs? Aren't they a thing?
That's exactly who I was trying to think of. Yeah, the Trogs.
Yeah.
But because when I think garage band, I always think like like tinny produced, not very well produced, probably one-shot recording, raw, stumbling guitar songs.
Yes.
And you're saying Oasis had that sound?
When I discovered them, they had a couple sounds. They had that sound that, one take, just turn everything up and play. And then they had a more refined sound where they added a little more texture to what they were doing. Because when I discovered them, I had, and I think I've told this story in a previous episode, I had been going through a buying binge because I was really getting into music around this time. And I had actually picked up their first album, Definitely Maybe, and never really got it into rotation because I was buying so much at once. I didn't really have time to listen to it all.
So was that a common occurrence? Like you were just like inhaling CDs from the store?
I was at this period, yes.
So, and you were buying stuff that you weren't even listening to?
I was buying stuff that I was eventually going to be listening to. That's what I was telling myself. I don't know. I've said this before too. I feel like I missed that musical awakening experience that a lot of people have in high school. And so when it was starting to dawn on me, in college, I kind of went overboard, I think.
Well, you were in a good place for it. Boston at the time had a lot of music stores.
Fantastic. And that's going to play a part. I don't know if we can talk about it now or if it will come to it. But being in Boston and having so many music stores and shops where you can have bootlegs and a place like Newbury Comics that was importing singles, that was a big deal and a huge reason why Oasis became such a big thing for me.
So not so much the studio albums, but sort of this expansion of stuff, these odds and ends,
because what happened, I think the song was "Roll With It," which is the first single off their second album, What's the Story, Morning Glory. I think I heard Roll With It playing over a speaker at Sam Goody or Strawberries or somewhere. And so I picked up that album and took that home and listened to it and loved it. And I think...
The whole album.
Yeah, the whole album. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, some of this sounds familiar. Because I had listened to Definitely Maybe. It just wasn't in rotation. And so I was kind of...
Was it in your head? Like, would you have been able to pick out a song?
No, I don't think I could. I don't think at that time I could have. But the sound was there. The voice I could kind of recognize. And then also their logo, the cool block letter, the Oasis in the block, the black and white. That stood out. And so as soon as I was kind of putting it all together, I was like, holy shit, I already have one of their albums. And that's when it sort of blew up for me. I put that album back in, listened to it without looking at the next purchase that I got and trying to open that. I was actually listening to the album. And that noise you hear is me holding the discs.
That's what it sounds like to hold a CD in the 90s.
And so, yeah, hearing both of those albums, both of those sounds, which, while the same, because it's the same band, are distinct enough that it's like there's a movement going on here. This is like they go from this raw rock to this more refined pop while still having that rock edge. And then I start reading about them and I look for more things. I'm like, oh, geez, if they've got 2 albums out, maybe there's a third one. I don't know. So I start looking for more things at the record stores and I find their singles. And by this point, they've got, I think, 4 singles off of Definitely Maybe and at least 1 from What's the Story, Morning Glory. So there I've got already 5 more items to purchase, each with at least 2 new songs, which is basically an entire new album. You know, when you add it all up. And what was amazing for me is that these B-sides were just as good, if not better, than the albums. And so I was just overtaken by Oasis music in a very short amount of time. And it just left me wanting the next thing and the next thing. And it made me want to listen to them all the time and share it with people all the time, which I think is why a lot of people think of me when they hear Oasis, because I would talk their ear off about it or hand them the mixtape or whatever.
So you became a collector off of, like, within the span of hearing a song. It sounds like, at least the way you told the story. I mean, you just describe the great feeling of discovering a band. You hear that song, or you get that album, and then you back then you'd rush. It's different now. You find music a different way, but however it is you obtain the music, you rush out and get it. But you were also getting into them. You were into them because you had gotten that album before. But the second album, the What's the Story, Morning Glory, that was a big deal on the radio.
It became a big deal. Yeah.
It wasn't at the time?
It wasn't at the time. No, Wonderwall might have been playing on MTV, but I hadn't heard it until after I had the album.
You weren't collecting other bands the way, like we've talked before about Pearl Jam, and you and I would get some Pearl Jam singles. We were fans of Pearl Jam. Like that is something you would do.
I did it here and there. Like I wasn't really collecting. Like I had 1 or 2 Pearl Jam singles, but only because I had heard yours. Like I think you had them, and I was like, oh, that song's fantastic. So I would get that particular single, but I wasn't doing that on a regular basis. Seeking out more than just their initial album release. And I certainly wasn't looking for the Japanese import that had 2 other bonus songs or anything like that. That all started after Oasis.
So were other people listening to Oasis then? Like it sounds like you said you were bringing it to other people because you're giving them mixtapes and talking about it. Did people at least know who they were? Yeah,
there were a few folks at college that were into them almost as much as I was. Yeah, definitely.
Really? Okay.
There were a couple girls I know that actually went over to Europe for a semester after knowing the band, becoming a fan. And part of their excitement of going overseas was to hopefully check out the band and see the band. So yeah, there were other fans. And I actually made one of those women. I don't know if I gave her $20 or if I said I would pay her afterwards, but I said, anything unique and Oasis, please bring it back to me. And she ended up bringing back, and I'm so happy. This is such a cool item. I've never seen it in the States at that time, and I doubt I would even be able to find it now. They sold plastic, they looked like cigarette boxes that would open up like a cigarette box would, kind of a flip top, to store the singles. You could buy them with the singles in them, but she knew I had them, and she ended up seeing those and bought me both the Definitely Maybe and What's the Story Morning Glory cigarette cases that would store the singles. I have those from her, and so I thank her very kindly.
So was this the first thing you collected? Like you're collecting them. And I say this knowing, to jump ahead, that you had a lot of Oasis memorabilia up. I mean, Oasis is the band I equate with you.
Sure.
And Oasis is also, and this might be why I always think of you as your being about music, and music is your thing, being ahead of it. Because I first heard Oasis through you before I knew them. Like Wonderwall is the first song I can recall from being on the radio, and it's a song that I like, and I feel like that was the hit. Maybe it wasn't, but I feel like that was the first hit that kind of broke them. Mm-hmm. But when I heard it, I knew who they were only through you. I already knew of them from you talking about them, so they were your thing. And because it's music, like I understood this at the time with comic books, I understood this with toys, but with music, I had the bands I liked, and I had the bands I liked that I thought nobody else knew about. But this was that experience of kind of, you were talking about a band, and then, I don't know the duration, a week, 2 weeks, a month later, everybody was talking about it. And I was like, you knew them. And so there is a little something in me where I'm like, you were ahead of a curve somehow. To maybe step back a minute, or they have a starting place. Let's talk about. Is it cool if we go through them album by album, talk about it that way a little bit, and see what comes out of that? I know it's not how I heard them, because what we did today is we listened to their 4 albums from the '90s, and we're gonna to kind of chart their growth there.
To be clear, there are 3 studio albums from the '90s, and then they released a B-sides collection in, I think it was 1999. So we've included that as well. Because
as the narrative progresses, that's the one I think is most important to understanding fandom and your fandom with them. But we'll get to that. We'll make it to the last album, because I have very clear thoughts on that album. But let's start out with this first album. So before I knew who they were, but it sounds like you had the album in 1994? Is that when they released Definitely Maybe?
That's right.
This first song, I mean, the first song in this album, Rock and Roll Star, which is kind of a statement in itself. I mean, I thought it sounded like the Black Crowes, kind of. Like, it sounded like American rock to me in a way, and it's arrogant.
They toured with the Black Crowes.
Did they really? Mm-hmm. That makes sense, but I didn't know that. I don't know, this... And again, I don't know if it's necessarily something I would have listened to, but they're arrogant right from the start. All of their songs are first person. It's them, I, this, you can with me. But what I got from this album is that they weren't a band of slackers. They weren't a band of failures. They weren't like all the bands I was listening to. They weren't stumbling losers who couldn't figure shit out, or who were, the bastards of young, or whatever that is. They weren't even of the era. Like, I listened to this album, Definitely Maybe, and I was thinking, this is 70s sounding, 70s arrogance and 70s excess, and not really lyrically driven. Like, that is something I noticed. Like, I'm not a fan of their lyrics.
Their lyrics are left wanting, for sure.
Which I never noticed before, but like in my car, go real far. That's the beauty of it?
In a way, because that's how good the music is, and that's how arrogant and confident they are. They don't have to write a second verse. They just repeat the first verse. That's enough, because the music rocks.
I don't know. Because the music is good. They have a sound. They have a big sound. I don't know if it's their sound or not, but they have a pretty big sound. It's also a sound that I'm constantly hearing someone else in. Like that first track sounded like the Black Crowes. The second track, is it Shaker Maker?
Shaker Maker, yeah.
Yeah, that starts a little bit like a Creedence Clearwater Revival song, sort of like another American song, and then it goes into I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. Like, there's maybe
That's
the reason
exactly it. They were going to actually have the last verse be "I like to teach the world to sing" because the song is near identical to that song structure. But Coca-Cola wouldn't let them do that. They couldn't get the rights.
But what do you think of, like, they have later on, there's a song that sounds like Bang a Gong. Cigarettes and Alcohol starts off like it's Bang a Gong, get it on. Like they have a 70s inspiration.
They do.
Through all of their songs that gets me and is exciting and is a nice sort of entry for someone into that. But I don't know. What is their sound on this album? Because if it's not, to me, I felt like if it's not a band I've heard before, Live Forever, for example, the third track, which I think sounds like them, sounds what I think of them. It sounds like what I think they sound like, because that song sounds like Wonderwall, right? That's Wonderwall, isn't it? Live Forever?
Sure, yeah. It's very, very, the chord progression, I think, is very similar.
Well, that's,
but the chord progression of half of their songs are very similar to the other half of their songs.
So they're very instrumentation, which is great for music, but it's just interesting to me because I'm like, I don't know their sound on this album. Like, do you listen to this album all the way through?
I do.
You do?
I listen. There's not a song on here I would skip.
There isn't? No,
I absolutely love this album. I love their sound. I get what you're saying. They're clearly inspired. I mean, Noel Gallagher is the lead guitarist, the main songwriter for the band, is a music nerd.
So that's what they're doing. He's showing his...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's doing it necessarily as, hey, look at all the great music I've listened to in the past, but probably is. I mean,
Well, you said that they wanted to end that song to acknowledge the song that they're taking it from. Like, and I'm not...
Yeah.
I think I set out to say it like a derogatory thing. That's actually not a derogatory thing. I take back my almost intention of talking. They're doing something. It's like they're doing like an homage to the 70s is what I'm hearing on this album, and to their influences, which is what people do. And it's interesting to me that they're not at all trying to hide it.
Right.
Like, it's blatantly there, which is kind of a punk rock thing to do. It's right there. And I guess what's interesting is it's also well made. Like, I don't hear GarageBand when I hear them. I hear a very well produced U2-like sounding band, like right from the get-go of this album.
I don't know if U2 sounding is the way to go. Certainly they had skilled engineers put the album together. If you knew some of the history of recording this album, what you're hearing, I think, is like the third version, because no one could quite capture their sound.
What's what I heard, though? I mean, this is what they gave the world. This is
correct.
The majority of the world heard.
This is what they gave the world. But it took some effort to get to this well-produced album. And I still think, for me, and again, I'm still new to music when I'm hearing this band, new to expanding my music horizons. To me, this still sounded so much more raw and rough than the Hooties and the Hueys and the Harrys that I had been listening to beforehand. I mean, you hear like the chair squeak at the beginning of Cigarettes and Alcohol. You hear somebody laughing in another song. So it's like, to me, it was a lot more rough than the stuff I'd been hearing before.
But this was an eye-opener to you.
It blew my mind.
Was this album, I guess? Like, you were saying you had it, you didn't listen to it.
It was both of them at the same time.
Both of them being this, and the next one, what's the story, Morning Glory?
Yeah. Like, having both of those so close together. It's not like I heard Definitely Maybe and got to sit with it for a year, and then a year later heard What's the Story, Morning Glory. I heard something off of Live Forever, or excuse me, off of Definitely Maybe, and it might have been Live Forever, that made me want to buy the album. And then I heard songs off of What's the Story, Morning Glory, and then I was playing them back to back in like a weekend, and it was almost that immediate as the songs kind of poured through. And I know that I was sitting in my little building private room in the suite on the 6th floor or whatever it was, listening to this alone on my bed with my eyes closed, and it just washed over me, song after song, some hard rocking, some sweet ballads. It just was an experience to have these both grab me at the same time. Because I think you'll find, and we'll talk about, I don't know if you want to keep talking about Definitely Maybe, because I can, because we've only touched a couple songs here.
We did, because this is, I don't know this album. I didn't really recognize anything off this album except for every time I thought Wonderwall was playing. I don't remember you playing this album, although I know the title, so I must know it from you talking about it. I found it interesting to put it on because it was not what I was expecting, and yet it's exactly what they are. Like their sound, I was asking you, is this their sound? Their sound is pretty formed from this album, I think. I know you said they went through a lot to produce it. I don't know exactly how bands produce, but I'm like, to put out a first album and you kind of had this experience too, where after you know them, you go back and listen to it. For me, listening to it this time, I'm like, this does sound like what I know them as. And that's not a knock. And I think I was so ready to knock this band.
Yeah. As an example, we talked about Radiohead a few shows back.
Well, that I would love to knock. I'd love to knock Radiohead.
But I'm just saying, as great as Radiohead is,
as a band that exists as Radiohead is,
their first album does not set the stage for anything. It doesn't really give you an indication of who the band is or what they'll become.
Nor should it, though. I feel like that, not should it, but like that's the normal progression, is a band is finding itself. Either you love that first album and you don't love what comes after it, or you like it and they become something is the experience I've had. Isn't it odd that that their first album could be what they are, and as we're going to see, continues to sound like what they are? Like, that's interesting to me.
These first three albums are for sure, that's who Oasis is, and that's who Oasis to me will always be.
I guess that's what I was going to, like, they are this period, right? This opening period of brash, obnoxious, mid-20 pricks, because they're pricks. That is the appeal of this band, right?
That's part of the appeal. I wouldn't call them pricks. They are.
I don't mean that as again, none of this is as a knock as much as my notes make it seem like it. Because again, I was ready to tear this band apart. But hearing you talk about it, and as I'm talking about it, it is, I think they're the posturing of rock that wasn't there. And I don't know if this is why they became a hit in the 90s. The 90s, you have grunge, which a lot of that's phony now. But it's like, it's people who just, they haven't given up, but it's kind of like the world is going to pass them by. We're products of the 80s, and they're sensitive. Grunge musicians were supposed to be sensitive. Chris Cornell is a sensitive guy. The Goo Goo Dolls are not grunge, so I don't know why I said them. But this is not that. This is a couple of guys, blokes they might be called,
brothers,
stepping on stage, brothers to each other, and just being the kind of people that I would hate. That's the other thing. Like, I like this music, but I would hate them. I would hate to know them because they're so fucking full of their greatness. They can sing lyrics like, I'll tell you how I feel, the way I feel is oh so real, which is a lame lyric. They can sing that with this weird sort of posturing. And I have it in my head. I don't know exactly what they look like, but it's just this sort of like, fuck you all, this is what we're going to do attitude, which isn't punk rock the way I'm thinking of it, but it is 70s rock. Like, they just seem like a stadium act. I can't picture them playing tiny clubs right from the beginning. They seem like a stadium act. And I know the comparison, and the one that I was even going to make is always the Beatles, but I don't think they were doing the Beatles. I think they were doing whatever came after the Beatles. I think they liked the Beatles, and I know they perform a lot of Beatles songs, and they have an accent, and they have a lot of musical cues that sound like the Beatles, but they're doing something that didn't make the transition successfully into the 90s, and yet they did it well. They're doing Kiss. They're doing T-Rex. They're doing David Bowie. They're doing they're doing this Slade, which I guess that's British. So that's probably the better comparison. But they're doing it from that first track on that first album by calling it Rock and Roll Star. Yeah. I mean, that should be crap at that
You're
point.
all in my hands tonight. That's the first song. They're telling you that you are in my hands now. I've got you.
So it's a pretty impressive act.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. And I'll be honest, that album, the first album, would not have hooked me on them. It's interesting and I like it, but similar, I think, to how you kind of experienced it, I'm glad, and let's jump into it. I'm glad I had this second album first. What's the Story, Morning Glory. I mean, that's the one I knew. That's the one that was on the radio. To hear you talk about Oasis, I do have some vague memories of walking around with you as you're talking about it and not knowing who you're really talking about until I heard the fucking first hit. Well, I thought was the first hit off this, maybe not. Wonderwall, the song that they constantly write. Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
That song, that hit, that anthem, that actually, I was just saying how they weren't 90s grunge. Wonderwall is the speed that I was working at that time of my life in 1995. It's sad. It's defeated. There's a longing to it. Wonderwall is actually the closest to the music I would have been pursuing. It's like a heartbroken walk through Kenmore Square is Wonderwall. Yeah. And that sucked me in, sure. And thankfully, all their songs start sounding like Wonderwall. So of course I'm going to listen to this album. But do you remember the first time you heard Wonderwall? Is that their biggest hit? Would you say that's what everyone knows them for?
Yeah, I would definitely say Wonderwall is their biggest hit. Champagne Supernova is probably a close second.
Do you like Wonderwall? Do you like that song?
I do like Wonderwall. I can't tire of Wonderwall. I always think that perhaps I would, but I haven't tired of it. No. And they play it. They still play it. You'll hear it on the radio at least once a day if you're listening to the radio long enough.
It's a good song. It's just, and people know it. I have to say, of all their songs, I think this is what people of all ages still know. And it doesn't ruin the song, right? It doesn't, not all bands have a hit, but not all bands have Aerosmith will always have to perform Walk This Way. The Rolling Stones probably always have to perform Satisfaction.
Right.
Oasis, which I guess they're disbanded, so we don't have to consider it really, will always have to play Wonderwall. And I guess I'm wondering, was that song ruined by being overplayed? And somehow it's still a personal song to me. That song does still get me in a way that the only other song they have two other songs that get me that same way, and they were all hits. That's what's weird.
What gets
to me.
you?
What else?
Yeah.
Well, similar to how I was saying Wonderwall was kind of where it was at that time. More recently, last 4 or 5 years, a song that's actually become an anthem for me. I play the song a lot. I think about the song a lot. When I hear it, I'm picturing myself going through stuff. Don't Look Back in Anger, which I think is the song right after Wonderwall.
It is on the album, correct?
Yeah. That, to me, I mean, it's Imagine, and it's Revolution, and it's all the young dudes. It's all those songs. But it's also, and this is what I don't understand, and this is why I like it now, but I'm like, what were they doing? That's a song about a midlife crisis. That's a song, to me anyways, about where I'm at now. And I love it. And I liked the music and the sound of it. That's the thing. I think when I was younger in the 90s, I loved the sound. They have some great musical transitions. He does some great things with his voice in terms of tone. Most of the subject matter wasn't something that interested.
Real quick, though. You're saying he does a lot of great things with his voice. At this stage on the second album, we've got two singers.
Oh, see, I don't. The British one is the one I'm talking about.
The British one.
Which one is that?
So Don't Look Back in Anger is sung by Noel.
Okay.
Who is our lead
sang
guitarist.
Hello? Who sang the first song and what's the song?
Liam.
Before? Okay, he does some great things where his voice changes octaves and stuff that I really like.
Sweet.
Don't Look Back in Anger I really like. I don't get... that's a song, why did they write that in their 20s? That is a song that actually has lyrical substance, which I don't think of normally. And I don't know if it's just where I am, but that has relevance to me now. And I've always liked the song, but that really feels like that's where I'm at now. What do you think that song was about when you were in your 20s and when they were singing it? Do you think they thought it was about anything? Because it's the Bob Dylan documentary has the same title. I assume that's why they're calling it that.
I don't think they necessarily had an intention. And if he did, it was a very private thing, I would imagine. But yeah.
Why would you imagine? I don't think that's the norm. Well, I don't think musicians are private about their intentions.
Here's why I don't think that he does, because he has said in interviews that I've watched and read that he's really sometimes just throwing rhyming words together. And specific to this song, and I hope I don't ruin it for you.
The Don't Look Back in Anger song?
To Don't Look Back in Anger, the part, so Sally can wait. She knows it's too late. He wasn't singing that. And there's an interview where Liam takes ownership of those lyrics because he heard him practicing the song and said, "Are you singing So Sally Can Wait? That's pretty awesome. Like, what does that mean? You're singing So Sally Can Wait?" He's like, "No, I'm not singing that. But I think I'm gonna. Yeah, that sounds better." So that's kind of how
the fuck, man,
was put together. Yes.
So I'm creating any meaning this song has,
and you're doing that with any song, because the song that's written is meaningful. You're putting your own ideas to any song. There might be some songs where they clearly lay out what the song's about.
I'm not saying clearly, but I'm saying that there's an aspect of poetry, which well-written songs are poetry, that there is some heart in that. Yes, how you perceive it is only how you perceive it.
Right.
But if I'm touched by, say, a commercial jingle, I can't think of a single one right now. I know that's not the intention. And I know that I'm being attracted to where I was when I heard the jingle or whatever. This is a song that hits my core. And this is a song, maybe it's the music that does it, but why would the music of Don't Look Back in Anger, which is a song that doesn't sound like Wonderwall, why would the music of that convince me that this is about a midlife crisis? There has to be something in it, right? Otherwise, isn't that a charlatan thing?
No, I think
not
what
have
you're
written
saying,
a lyric?
No, I think what you're saying is right. It's poetry.
But it's not if what he's doing is just throwing words around. It's not poetry
that can be
to rhyme car with jaguar, as he will in a few years after this. I mean, that's not poetry. That's bad writing. And for you to now tell me that Don't Look Back in Anger is also bad writing?
Maybe it's just lucky writing. And maybe it's
what does that mean?
And maybe it's hearing that random
song?
thing. Maybe it's hearing that random thing and realizing that has some poignancy and keeping it, even though it wasn't maybe what you started with. There's many ways that you can get to a meaningful moment in music.
Do you like this song?
I love this song.
Why do you like it? And when did you start liking it?
The day I heard it is when I started liking it. Because it's the lyrics are so weirdly ambiguous that it can affect you in the ways that it needs to. But
that's not what he's doing. That's what we're doing with it.
That's what we're doing. Yeah. And you're right. Maybe that he wasn't like, oh, this is going to trick everybody into loving the song or whatever.
Not trick, but there's something about putting something out there and being like, you'll make of this what you will, but it still comes from somewhere. And for him to say, like, these words rhyme, is he laughing at us for finding meaning in the song?
I think he has always been more of a melody. He, as a songwriter, he prefers the melody. He prefers the tones and the musicality. I think lyrics always come to him last. There are rare occasions.
I think that's apparent.
Yeah, there are rare occasions where songs do have a deeper meaning. When we get to the last album, there's one song on that is ripped from his life and has become a very famous song in the pantheon of Oasis. And so he does it.
Did he just not write did he not like writing lyrics?
I don't think he did. He wasn't a fan of it.
So why was he the one writing the lyrics?
He was the one writing the music, and nobody else wanted to give him any lyrics.
But he wrote the music and the words, like Barry Manilow does.
Yes, exactly like that.
I don't think I knew that. I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah. With later albums, that changes, but these first three, it's all him.
So do you remember the first time you heard Don't Look Back? Is that your favorite song in this album, Don't Look Back in Anger? Did you already say?
Off this album, there are so many good songs. There's
a
so
good
many
album.
Good songs.
This is a solid, amazing 90s album.
It is. It really is. And you know what? It's like, it's the song, the album's called What's the Story, Morning Glory, and one of the songs that gets talked about least is the song Morning Glory. And I absolutely love that song. I forget it because there's so many other great songs, when I heard it again on this album this past couple days, I was like, this song is so good. But I probably, if I had to pick one, I would go with She's Electric.
That's a fun song.
It's a fun, upbeat, poppy song.
And I remember you liking that song. That's interesting. Yeah. That's very...
And if I were to get the Japanese vinyl version of this album, which I don't have...
Listeners, then start getting those stamps ready.
Then my favorite song would change, because on that version of the release, they added a song called Bonehead's Bank Holiday.
Okay. Yeah.
Which you don't like, apparently.
We're because focusing on what I had to sit through.
That's what I'm saying. I overplayed that song. I absolutely love that song. That is a silly...
name is Bonehead.
That is the nickname of their rhythm guitarist, Paul Arthurs.
Obnoxious. He has a real name too? It's not just B-Head? Yeah.
But yeah, that song is great. That is probably their loosest sounding fun song. Noel sings the lead. It is just a silly song. They actually wanted Bonehead to sing it, but he cannot carry a tune. So even though that was part of the expectation, it was so bad that they had Noel sing it. It's so much fun. And I only recently discovered, this is how fun the song is. Because Noel is singing it, and Liam didn't get to sing. He didn't have much to do. He had to be in the background. So there's some background singers. And at one point in the song, Liam in the background actually sings his own name, which I only discovered probably about 2 years ago. And it is the greatest Oasis moment, because it's I just picture this moment of Liam being pissed off that his brother's got the studio time and he still has to make an appearance. So there's these background singers. And in the song, Noel sings about wish that he was home with his friends. And so he just in the background sings Liam Gallagher. And you can barely make it out. But once you do hear it, it is just so fucking phenomenal. Because I have a brother. I've got 2 daughters who are sisters who annoy each other. And just picturing Liam Gallagher being annoyed with his brother and finding a way to put it on record forever that he includes his own name in a song is just the funniest thing. And that's the thing, too, that we probably won't get into here. I find these guys, you call them pricks, and they are, but they're also pretty damn funny.
You like the rivalry. You like the sibling rivalry.
I do.
Rock and roll banter that's probably staged a little bit.
It is. There's a lot of... It's not... It is and it isn't.
It's like wrestling.
It is and it isn't. It got to a point where they realized that that's what the tabloids and the British press were expecting. And so they overdid it at one stage. But there are points when they're coming up, and then also when they're not the biggest band in the world anymore, where their rapport is hilarious. And the way that they talk to each other and they talk about other bands, they're being sarcastic, but it comes off as them being mean. And so if I got to show you, I'll send you a couple other links. I know I sent you some links for the show notes. I'll send you a couple more of late era Oasis that I think you'll find humorous, maybe.
Something you just said, or a couple sentences ago, you talked about when they weren't, I think you something about them not being as big as they were. There was a period where they were the biggest band, yes. I think.
And maybe not in America.
They were huge. What are we talking about? They were huge in America.
They were pretty big in America. They were bigger everywhere else.
Okay.
But and so imagine that. And as huge as you saw them in America, they were bigger everywhere else.
What I guess is odd, I think about that. I think about this period. I think about this album, and it makes me think of stuff like the Vaselines. It makes me think of stuff like the Laws. These bands that are pretty much known for this one game-changing album. I think both are British. I'm not sure if the Vaselines are British, but What's the Story, Morning Glory is an album. That is a soundtrack and a seminal album and an important album with important songs. And there's it's the one I own. I own this Oasis album. I've had it for a very long time. I bought it after, I don't think I had it until you moved out to California. Because they were always there.
It's my Paul Westerberg.
It's
because
my 14 songs.
I did the same thing. I picked up Paul Westerberg and the Replacements after leaving you.
And it's a great fucking album, and I enjoyed listening to it. I wish this was their only album.
Their only
I
album.
wish this was the thing they did, and then that was it. Because this is such an integral album to our last couple of years in college. This is such a big album for the era. They were so big. I'm not sure what happened after this. The next album, Be Here Now, which apparently got amazing, was praised by critics when it came out. Like, they loved this fucking album.
It was one of those albums that was so anticipated, and everyone was already so in love. Well, maybe not everyone, but so many people were already so in love with Oasis. There was sort of this they could do nothing wrong mentality at the point that this album came out, and it sold millions. It was the fastest selling album. And it did. It got lots of great reviews. Yeah, Be Here Now. It was great. And then as people actually got to sit back and listen to it, people's opinions changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So people were caught up in the hype of a band versus the music they were doing. What did you think of this when it first came out? What year did this come out? You may have just said. I'm sorry.
It came out in 97. So yeah, it was 94 for Definitely Maybe, 95 for What's the Story, Morning Glory, and 2 years later for Be Here Now.
And this was everyone knew who they were by this point. People knew what was coming out. What did you think when you first, did you get it the day it came out?
I got it the day it came out at a Tower Records. I was living in LA at the time, Sherman Oaks.
Okay.
And I got it the day it came out. I listened to it nonstop for about 3 or 4 months, and I like this album. I know it's got faults, and I don't listen to the whole thing. There are songs I skip. I don't skip anything on the first 2 albums. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to count the little interstitial things on What's the Story, Morning Glory.
You don't skip Cast No Shadow off of What's the Story, Morning
Glory?
No,
why would I skip Cast No Shadow?
Because it sounds like a 1996 Goo Goo Dolls song.
I like Cast No Shadow.
And Wonderwall.
No, but I skip songs. I skip songs on Be Here Now.
Okay. Because I'd never heard this album, to be honest. Nothing sounded familiar, and I'm sure it played, but I didn't remember it. Well, I mean, it starts with Back in the USSR, so I get that. But it's a very different sound. Like, I wouldn't have known this was them. It sounds like Cheap Trick or something. It sounds like, I know we disagreed on this earlier, you too. It's very orchestral. There's a lot of sound to it. And again, I liked it. There's a lot
of noise to it, yes.
And yes, there's a lot of feedback to it. And I didn't realize on the first 2 albums, so maybe I'm wrong, they write some long fucking songs.
These are the longer songs. There's a few long songs on the other 2.
But these are maybe the 2 long songs?
Yeah, this one, first song, second song, third song, 8th song, 9th. Yeah, there's a lot of long songs on this one. This was when they also kind of fed into, I think, We Could Do No Wrong. And they wanted to do whatever they wanted to do, and what they were doing was mostly cocaine, and they just threw everything that they wanted to at this album. There's like one song on here that I think sounds reservedly recorded, like it actually has some layers to it, whereas everything else is just everything's turned up to 11.
What song is that, if I may ask?
The first song, Do You Know What I Mean?
Oh, okay. I like that song. I like that start. Again, I would not have known it was them. I
knew it right away.
Really?
I actually here's how I heard this song for the first time, because it was the first single off the album. I had my alarm set to get up and go to work, and it went off, and I shared a room, so I immediately turned it off. I heard about 2 seconds of whatever song was playing, and in that 2 seconds, I turned it off, and I thought, oh, wait, shit, that's a new Oasis song. And I went to the other room because I didn't want to wake up my roommate, and I turned the radio on again, and it was, in fact, Do You Know What I Mean? So I knew right away.
In fact, still playing. Cause it's the
and it was, in fact, still playing.
Did you know the album was coming out?
Oh, yeah, I knew it was coming up.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, at that time, I didn't have a computer, and the internet was still so very young.
Well, okay. So, but you do, I don't know. Something about this it feels like they're growing, and they can't stop growing. And maybe you said it when you said they were just buying their own hype. But
yeah, I think they were buying their own hype. I think I've always thought, well, not always, but after sitting with the album and really hearing it, I feel like what they tried to do, because definitely maybe was more of a rock sounding album, and Morning Glory was more reserved, had more soft songs.
it had 4 Wonderwalls.
It had 4 Wonderwalls. I think they were trying to get back to the rock sound while still giving people the Wonderwalls that they wanted. And it didn't quite work. So, like,
how many Wonderwalls are on this album?
There's at least 2.
There are at least 2 Wonderwalls.
Stand By Me and Don't Go Away.
This is why this album, I'm just like, and maybe this always happens with bands. It seems like the perfect cinematic story. They were too big to do what I at least wanted them to do.
Yes.
This to me is an odd album, and I don't get why it was reviewed so well. Because it sounds different, but it's not earth-breaking like the previous one.
No, it's really not. And in fact, it's more. I still consider it more of a retread. There's probably like 2 or 3 songs on here that I think are a step forward. And
but who needs to get back to... This is only their 3rd album. Who needs to get back to basics after releasing 3 albums?
I don't think they're getting back to basics. I think they're just trying to continue to feed off of the fan base and give them what they think they want. And I think what they thought they wanted was more of those same 2 albums.
So it's insincere. It's an insincere album.
I think to a degree, yes. And you'll love this story. The song Magic Pie, which you probably have
Sounds like a Gorillaz song.
Yeah, it might. I'll have to listen to that again to see. But this was, again, there was really no thought put into what the song was about. It's called Magic Pie because he misread magpie. So, yes, it is an insincere album. It is them trying to just continue the massiveness of who they were as a band.
So do you fool yourself into liking it at the time because you're such a fan and you have to like it?
I don't think I fooled myself into liking it. I think I truly did like it. And and there's songs on here that I still absolutely love, including Magic Pie. I like Magic Pie. I love Do You Know What I Mean? I like The Girl in the Dirty T-Shirt. I like All Around the World. I know it's 14 minutes long or whatever it is.
It is real time around the world, and I had a hard time with that.
And honestly, my favorite song off this album, if it's not Do You Know What I Mean, it's Getting Better Man. I love that song.
Getting Better, open parenthesis, man, exclamation point, close parenthesis.
2 exclamation points.
Because they couldn't say all the time because people would accuse them of plagiarism. I don't know. That also seems out of character. That song's inconsistent with their brash. Maybe The Man helps it, but it's like that's a song aimed at someone else. That's like a We Are the World helpful kind of song. That's not them, right?
I don't think. I mean, you could read it that way. I think it's them. I think it's like our life is awesome and it's only getting better, man.
Okay, so it's smug. It's not telling someone. Okay, well, that's them. Sure. It's a nice chart, actually. The rise and fall of a band, almost. But there's actually 4 albums. And this 4th one that come out in 98, I believe, November 2nd, 1998. Am I right on that?
99, I thought, but maybe 98.
Was it? Okay. It's called The Master Plan.
98.
It's a compilation. Okay. A compilation of like B-sides and unreleased tracks.
Correct.
This album, to me, I feel like and maybe I'm wrong in this. I remember this album coming out. I remember you had a framed promotional piece of artwork for this.
I sure did.
That you obtained.
I had to go and obtain it.
You had to go to what was called a listener's party, right?
Yeah. I had to go to a listener's party for this. I saw it advertised in maybe it was the Boston Phoenix or something. That the first 25 people would get a exclusive signed poster of their new release, The Master Plan. And I had never been to whatever club this was. Remember I had to get there by bus. And I
remember all of this. It sounded so mysterious, but so big. I thought the band was going to be there. I thought there'd be hundreds and hundreds of people there. I thought, what is he doing? He's going into a drug den.
I'd never been there. I'd never traveled by bus in Boston, so I had to make sure I knew what I was doing. I got there, and I wanted to be one of the first 25 people. I wanted this poster. So they were opening the doors at, 8:30. And I was there at 7:15, and I was walking around. I was walking around the neighborhood, checking, every once in a while, making sure the line wasn't starting to form. And, as it's closer to 8.
What neighborhood? Where was this?
It was Harvard Square-ish. It was over in that direction. And it was getting close to the doors opening. Still no line. I didn't really need to be there almost an hour ahead of time. I think 2 people showed up before the doors opened, including and myself. So there were 3 of us, and we walk in, and they're playing God knows what, not Oasis. Nobody else is there except for the bartender and the guy at the door, and we had to say to this guy, "Hey, aren't you supposed to have like a poster or something?" And he didn't know, so he had to go talk to his manager. And he's like, "Oh yeah, let me get those." They were in the back room. He pulls them out. They're fine quality prints of the cover of this collection with all of the band's signatures also just pre-printed on them. They aren't real signatures. And I was just like, what the fuck did I just do? But this is pretty cool. I'm going to frame it for $140. Which is what I did.
Jesus. Apparently frames in 1998 were higher than they are now.
Yeah. But no, I went and I got it professionally framed with a professional matte sizing, all that shit.
And where is that picture now?
In my garage. Honestly, I'm telling you the truth. It's in my garage, and there is pigeon poop on it that I have yet to clean off.
This story... because I lived it as hearing about it and worrying for your safety because we were living as friends together at the time. This story represents to me a realization. This story represents to me a downfall. This story is Eddie and the Cruisers 1 and 2 in that whatever the band, and again, this is an outsider looking in because the band doesn't mean as much to me as it does to you. That one album has 3 songs that mean a lot to me. But this to me was... all right, you had your run, you're done. And what better way to show your biggest, most dedicated fan, Bob Canning, that you're done, than to send him off to who knows where to get a rinky-dink facsimile of a poster with 2 other people that basically demonstrates the fandom of Oasis past.
Yeah.
And I love this fucking story because this album, it's whatever this album is, we can talk about, but I just love it because you're still a fan and you stuck with them and they mean something to you. And it's not just that they're the biggest band in the world. It's not just that they have screaming fans. And I know you've said you've seen them, so it's not like you had to fight crowds to see them then. You have since. They were your favorite band. And I feel like this story and this experience demystifies something, which maybe is what we need to do with things we love. It knocks the pedestal down, and maybe you weren't doing this. Again, I'm projecting a little bit. It's like they're not a social phenomena now. They're just a band, and being just a band is far more impactful. Because a social phenomena, everybody bites into, shares, and says the same thing. It's Watchmen in 2009 when everybody had the fucking book and everyone was suddenly in the comics.
You hate that.
Well, it's childish. I shouldn't because that's how we get these things out there, and that's how Oasis was able to make more albums because they had a fan base. But the relationship, I think we need to be reminded sometimes that our relationship with the music is with the music, and it's personal, and it's not. It's life-changing for us, but it's not world-changing.
Yeah.
A bartender who forgot why he was there can't take away from you that this means something to you and only you. Like, how much better to hear that album? I'm assuming you listened to it
You're talking about this night, this listening party? I got my poster, saw what the situation was, and left.
So you didn't hear the album that night?
No. I didn't need to. I mean, they're all B-sides that I already had.
Oh, okay.
So I was just there for the poster. Had the vibe been different, I mean, I was prepared to hang out with a bunch of Oasis fans. And that wasn't about to happen. So I left.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Again, and I'm trying to think how to wrap this up. Like, what else? What do you have some other things you wanted to say specifically? Like, what? I don't know if we got into what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, just this initial experience of discovery, of discovering a band, a TV show. I mean, there's nothing that beats that. I mean, it's such a cool, great feeling when you just connect with something to the point where you want just to know everything about it. It's a great feeling. I'm glad that I've had the experience. I'm glad it's Oasis. I'm glad it wasn't, Hootie and the Blowfish that I just kept following for years and years and years.
That we just spoke about for an hour and whatever.
Yeah.
Have you? So, that experience that you're just explaining? Have you had that exact experience with other things, or is Oasis kind of its own independent feeling for that?
There's nothing. I've had no experience like Oasis. I've had similar experiences, but nothing as strong and as immediate as Oasis. I think I do it with a couple other bands. I did it with Travis, and Travis ends up being the better band that had the longevity and kept putting out good music. And I think part of the reason Travis does that is because they never became as huge as Oasis. I did it with another band, Gomez. That was a band I was really into and picked up as much as I could when they came out. I've done it with some movies and TV shows. It's kind of different because a movie is just a movie. I guess you can get the books about it and all that stuff. So I guess I really haven't done it with anything but music because I don't have any other pop culture that I have other mediums of things like Oasis. It's posters, it's books, it's DVDs, it's the albums. But there isn't a TV show that I don't just have that TV show. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, I'm just happy to hear you talk about Oasis. And I will say, you changed, I don't know if you changed my mind, you halted the more acidic angle I was set to take. Because you genuinely love it, and I think
there's a joy there.
I don't do this with the things I love, and I wish I could. I don't get other people to like the things I like. I talk about it and I own it, and I won't shut up about it, but I'm not making someone suddenly enjoy the Inhumanoids or the Epoxies or something just by talking about them. And again, it helps that I know them, and it helps that I listened to some of these albums. It didn't help that I listened to all four, but you genuinely made me appreciate this band more. Not just, I mean, I don't think I'm going to go back and listen to anything but What's the Story, Morning Glory, but I'm also not just going to relegate them to being, by the way, 3-hit wonders is pretty impressive. Yeah. But no, I know their importance to you, and I do like hearing that side of it, and you've made me like them a little bit more.
Well, I'm glad that I could. That feels good.
That was our episode. Our episode is now done. But if you liked even part of this episode, know that there are a bunch of other episodes that you can listen to. You can check us out by visiting 20popcast.com. That's the main website. And when you're there, you'll see the most recent episode up for streaming. There are links to all the past episodes, so you can listen to those as well. Plus, if you are enjoying the show, why not subscribe to it? Why not use whatever Android or Apple device, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, however it is you hear podcasts, we're on it. So why not subscribe to us? You'll find links again at 20popcast.com. Subscribe to us there. You'll get a new episode every week. And if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts, if you could drop a little review. Give us however many stars you think we're worth, or better yet, a little text review. It helps us out. We like to hear it. It helps our egos or hurts us if you don't like us. Either way is fine. You can also, what can you do? You can check us out on Facebook. And you can also now, we have our own official for the show Twitter and Instagram pages. It only took over a year for that. I know, woohoo.
Oh, that was a hot mic. Sorry.
That was a very hot mic. But yeah, if you want, you can follow 20th Century Pop at 20popcast on Twitter, as well as at 20popcast on Instagram. You can also follow me, Tim Blevins, at Subcultist. Bob, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter as well, at RHCanning. And I'll also plug, I haven't updated it in a while, but you can go back and read through old posts of my mixtape blog, where I go back and listen to old mixtapes in chronological order and write about them. You can find that at superultramegamix.wordpress.com.
superultramegamix.wordpress.com?
That's right, superultramegamix.wordpress.com.
Great. And I would check that out. I bet there's some Oasis references there.
I'm pretty sure the first post is about Oasis, but there are at least 30 other posts, so check it out.
Also about Oasis. And thank you for checking us out. We'll be back next week. We're wrapping up the summer a bit, so maybe it'll be summer themed, end of summer theme. Maybe it'll be start of fall theme. Maybe it'll be neither of those. I don't know. I thought something would come to me, and it didn't. So thank you for listening to this. Bob, I would leave it in your hands to end this episode.
Toot!
I think I've cut that out of every episode
every time
accidentally.
I've been saying
but maybe this time it'll be. You've been saying toot, so maybe it'll stay. Maybe we'll use it.
I hope
maybe
so.
That's our catchphrase. We'll see. We'll hear. We'll have to listen.
Toot.
Would it be weird if when we started I had the wrong band and you were talking about Oasis and I was talking about Billy Ocean?
That would be weird. I think we'd figure it out pretty quickly, though.
It would be weirder if we didn't, like if it went the whole episode and like we got it.
True.
Yeah. Right.
We should try that sometime on an unsuspecting guest. We should give them a topic completely unrelated to what you and I are going to talk about and see how long it takes them to understand what's going on.
That'd be great. Also, is an ocean the opposite of an oasis? Did that make sense, or is that not? That's not right.
I guess no, it's not really right. Because a desert, I guess, would be the opposite of an ocean, and an oasis.
Like Sandy Duncan would have been a good answer.
Yes, if we were Sandy Duncan and Billy Ocean are opposites.
But Sandy Duncan and Oasis are not opposites.
Not directly, no.
Jesus.
In fact, you can't have one without the other, I don't think.
It's like love and marriage. Right? Which is a song that they sing.
That's not quite a song they sing.
Is it not?
They sing Married to Children, which is the name of a show that uses the song Love and Marriage as their theme song.
You're right. The whole time I listened to that, I'm like, this isn't how it goes. But that's why. Okay. Thanks. Instead of taking a sip, let me drink this whole cup of whiskey and then we'll start.
All right.